Inside the house of Helle and Phrixus, a family was trapped in a suffocating pitch-black bedroom. Desperate, they dragged a heavy wooden bed frame across the floor, wedging it against the door as thousands of volcanic rocks violently hammered against the other side. For 250 years, the world believed this terrifying ordeal happened in late August, but a faint charcoal inscription, scrawled by a worker on a Pompeii wall, tells a different story. The eruption actually occurred in mid-October, and the date is only the first piece of the puzzle. While that family worked frantically to keep the falling pumice rocks out, they were unaware that a much faster, invisible killer was already rushing down the mountain. This visceral struggle defines how we picture the fall of Pompeii. But as modern forensic science enters the ruins, we are discovering that we have only understood a fraction of the actual tragedy. The plaster casts of Pompeii's victims are iconic. For centuries, their preserved agony has been treated as a closed historical book, a static monument where the identities of the dead were considered settled. Today, researchers are treating the ruins as an active crime scene. Using techniques like X-ray fluorescence, scientists are peering through the plaster to map the chemical makeup of the actual human bones inside. Laboratory forensics are now providing a more accurate picture of how these victims died and who they really were. The disaster began with a relentless, hours-long rain of white and gray pumice. Accumulating at rates of up to 30 centimeters an hour, the rocks steadily buried the streets and sealed off the ground floors. Many Roman homes featured sloped roofs designed to funnel rainwater into a central indoor basin called an impluvium. Under a sky raining volcanic debris, these roofs dumped solid rock directly into the home. Flat-roofed buildings fared even worse. Unable to shed the load, their structures caved in under the weight, crushing the people taking shelter inside. The city's own architecture functioned as a trap. It pinned the surviving population in place, locking them indoors just as the cataclysm was unleashed. This diagram illustrates a pyroclastic density current. An avalanche of lethal material rushed down Vesuvius. The lower section hit Pompeii as a 100-degree cloud of toxic ash. Walls slowed this bottom layer, but the upper transport layer bypassed them, continuously raining lethal material. For decades, popular stories suggested the victims burned alive, but chemical analysis of the bones reveals they were actually suffocated by toxic gas in under 15 minutes. This rapid asphyxiation is why so many plaster casts show victims in relaxed or stretched-out postures, rather than curled into defensive bracing positions. A fast, invisible wave of toxic gas acted as the lethal mechanism that wiped out all life in Pompeii within minutes. Because of how the victims were preserved, historians often used modern assumptions to label them. When excavators found an adult wearing this ornate golden snake bracelet with a child resting on their lap, the story seemed obvious. For decades, historians confidently identified the figures as a mother comforting her child in their final moments. It was a highly emotional narrative that went unquestioned. Then, researchers successfully extracted ancient DNA from the remains. The results were definitive. The adult wearing the jewelry is a biological male, and he has zero genetic relation to the child. This wasn't an isolated mistake. In another excavated house, 4 people found huddled together were long presumed to be a family. DNA proved that 3 of them were total strangers. The stories we projected onto these victims were based on our own cultural expectations about gender, jewelry, and proximity. The genetics offer a warning against forcing our modern views onto past societies. If we look closely at these layers of ash deposited over the ruins, we find evidence of a final chapter. The timeline of Pompeii didn't end on the day of the eruption. Survivors who couldn't afford to start over elsewhere eventually returned to the wasteland. They converted the surviving upper floors into makeshift homes and turned buried rooms into cellars, living among the ruins to scavenge what they could. Early treasure-hunting archaeologists completely missed this post-eruption settlement. In their rush to dig down to the famous Roman frescoes, they swept away the faint traces of these survivors. Mount Vesuvius stopped a thriving city in its tracks. But as forensic science catches up to the archaeology, the victims of Pompeii are finally reclaiming their unvarnished history.